Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today we have 3 new stories prepared. The first one's about a horrible rental company. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Hire car company bills me for fuel. Broke my car on holiday and insurance arranged for a rental to get home. That was the limit of the insurance cover because I'm a cheapskate and I've always assumed I could use the wife's car. Unfortunately, that was in for a major service arranged while we were away. Total bummer. So I asked to extend the hire for a week self-pay. No problems. Week went by and the rental car was picked up from home. Then the rental company billed me to fill the tank with 3 liters of fuel plus a $50 surcharge. I lived within 500 meters of a gas station. I phoned the hire company, but they completely rejected my disputing the charge. Their word against mine. Full means full. Total stonewall. Even started to mention that if I wanted to take it any further, that I should get my lawyer to write to their lawyers. I phoned the insurance company, went over the story, and explained that the only way I could have had a fuller tank was if they'd picked it up at the gas station pump itself. The operative called over a manager, and they suddenly got very interested. Further managers were called, and a copy of my bill for 3 liters was requested. Insurance company phoned back a week later and said the charge had been dropped. Also, because of my phone call, their accountants had gone back over a year's worth using that hire company and were currently in dispute over many thousands worth of irregularities that legally we can't mention that may or may not be related to your complaint. And our next story. Do shady thing, fire my boss, hide millions from your client. I don't think so. This happened a while ago, but it's still so fresh in my mind. I left college with a business degree in one hand and no job in the other. And like so many colleges, the promises of alumni willing to give jobs to graduates could not have been further from the truth. So I had to seek out my start from the bottom. I found a good job in operations at a company, I can't say who without giving it away, had a great boss who taught me pretty much everything I needed to know, work was great, and the money was good. I need to explain how the business worked so you can understand how the plan worked. The corporate office was in California, and we were not. There are a lot of things that went on at this company, and I can't get into all of them because it would just take away from the story, but let's just say they had a very Stratton Oakmont vibe when it came to sales. I started out working in operations with some of the smaller clients, but with some help from my boss, was able to climb the ladder rather quickly to the point of being over all the operations and order processing for the firm. We had a very large client, 90% of the company's business. The way it worked was we had 2 sets of sales reps, TSRs and CSRs. TSRs were the heavy hitters who reached out to the other big businesses and tech firms to extend their warranties on a product. They made real good money. The CSRs were more of the mom and pop crowd and the inbound sales calls for those that wanted to extend their warranties. The reps were all given codes that associate the client's files with theirs. So if someone did a renewal automatically, they would get paid as it was their client. Pretty sweet gig. The client hired the firm to be the middleman for their B2B as they handled all their everyday clients. For every $100 that came into our firm, 18% or $18 would be for the company, and the rest would be sent to the clients with the warranties activated. Most of the clients paid by CC or PO with a wire transfer, but there would also be a good amount of checks each week that would need to be processed. A little while after I started, the client check portion was now going to be overseen by one of the sales managers. Didn't really faze me because I was working on the smaller accounts. Since we were a publicly traded company, all the sales reps' orders had to go to operations to be fulfilled. They weren't allowed to process them on their own. This is where things started going downhill. My boss at the time was given temporary access to the financials as they were hiring a new CFO, and he had a background with this. We went to lunch like we had done plenty of times before, but he seemed different. When I asked him if something was wrong, he told me that something looked off with our biggest client for one of the accounts. He wanted to make sure before he said anything to the higher-ups. While this was going on, I'd been offered the chance to be our new compliance officer, which means I'd need to make sure everything was on the up and up. Soon after, I come in to find out that my boss was just terminated for a multitude of reasons, all of which had to be untrue because he was a pretty well-liked guy, not just with the company, but with our client as well. As I log into my terminal, I see that before he left, he'd given me admin access to his files. Here's where things start to pop off. Remember those checks that clients were sending in to renew their warranties? Well, we were cashing them all right. Apparently, we just weren't adding those renewals to their products in the system. That would have triggered a payout to our client, who, as you remember, would be getting 82% of that money. Instead, we were cashing the checks, keeping the money, and using the interest in the accounts. Yes, the mid-2000s banks actually paid interest to cover losses in their collections department. It was wild to see that this was happening, and something had to be done. So I hatched a plan. First things first, secure a new job because it won't be a fun place to work after this. Done. My previous boss knew of other companies that would scoop me up, put in my notice, and stated in my exit interview that I just couldn't be a part of what was happening, even though HR was in on this. I wanted it on the record. Next, get approval for overtime for all the operations crew to come in on a Saturday and double pay them. They arrive early Saturday, obviously not too thrilled as to why they're there, but when I explain that if they complete the task, not only do they get their overtime, but they get nice bonuses, they were much happier. They spent the entire day applying all of those checks dated back years on the client accounts. We're talking millions of dollars. When all the sales reps arrived Monday, they were shocked as hell. Not only did they meet their weekly goals before picking up the phones, they made their monthly and quarterly goals too. 2 weeks into the new quarter. Cheers, partying, yelling, screaming, celebrating, except sales management. They went from being really excited to skeptical to confused to oh shit in about 2 hours. They realized where it must have come from, because not only did the company hit all these sales, since it'd been over a day, the client came into work Monday to see a very nice payday in their system as well. And like anyone would have questions, and says they're coming out to congratulate the team on such great numbers. So management starts scrambling because they can't figure out how this happened, and all under my boss's old login. On my last day, I arrive, and in the lobby, I've got my box to go for the last of my things. Guy walks up as he's waiting for the elevator with me, and we strike up a conversation. He notices my box and jokes about getting fired, and I just tell him I had a really great opportunity come up, so I decided to leave before shit hits the fan. We laughed. Really nice, down-to-earth guy. He realizes we're getting off on the same floor. He asks if I work for X. I say yes. He asks where. I tell him operations. And he reveals that he's the CEO of our client. Gulp. We go our separate ways. Client shows up and there's a big party. Afterwards, the client says that they'd love to get a breakdown of where most of the sales came from so they can allocate more money to that department. Management says, sure, but they made up a lie about how they can't share client payment info due to regulations, blah, blah, blah. Cue my exit from the company. 2 weeks go by and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. When I get off work, I check it to find out it was the CEO of the client where I used to work. He's had something come up and would like to talk to me. Of course, I'm nervous as hell, but I call him back and he picks up on the first ring and we get to chatting for a bit, and he finally just asks me, "Why'd you leave?" I tell him I had a great opportunity come up. He doesn't buy it and says that apparently my comment about crap hitting the fan really stuck with him, and he thinks something more is going on. So after a little more prodding from him, I tell him, just look at collections, and that's all I can say. He thanks me and I hang up. 2 days later, he pulled the plug on the account. Apparently, my old company tried to threaten him with a lawsuit for pulling the account 3 years early. He replied with, "That's fine, because when I show the courts that I have evidence that you committed fraud," corporate came in and cleaned house. All the management was fired within the day. 1 month later, my friends and I had a very memorable trip in Vegas, all courtesy of our old client. And our last story. My lawyer and I laid a trap for my adulterous, alcoholic wife in my divorce. When I got divorced, my alcoholic wife of 18 years had started another affair, this time with her addictions counselor. My lawyer and I laid a trap for them. In case you don't know, intimate relations between a counselor and patient are very frowned upon by regulatory bodies. And I was more PO'd after putting her through rehab, $25K, which I didn't have to do, only to have her fall back into her old behavior. Shortly before the divorce was finalized, I filed a complaint with the state body licensing health professions, knowing they were in some peril because of their unprofessional relationship. I'd already gotten him fired from a major teaching hospital. She'd backed off her exorbitant demands. I paid her a very modest settlement, kept the house, got custody of the 3 teenage kids, plus got child support. Her lawyer naturally included a clause in the divorce where I had to agree not to say anything negative about her lover and their relationship. But the lawyer effed up and never asked if I'd already filed charges and thus didn't require me to rescind them. Her lawyer had assumed I was just bad-mouthing them to neighbors and friends, and it never occurred to the lawyer that we were doing much more. When the Board of Health Professions responded to my complaint shortly after the divorce was finalized, I told them it would take a subpoena to get me to testify. A subpoena trumps an agreement in a divorce settlement. They were happy to oblige. They stripped his license and placed him on a register of sanctioned health professionals. He never worked again. They were broke in a handful of years, and she divorced him when the money ran out. In the interim, his mother had died, leaving a fair-sized estate. So it took longer than I expected. Oh, and the frosting on the cake was that his wife and I traded notes, notably hotel receipts from the time of their affair, that helped each of us in our respective divorces. Justice was served. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.